Today we'll be launching our latest joint publication with our partner, the Seoul Institute, on planning for communities, lessons from Seoul and Singapore. The Seoul Institute is the urban research think tank of the Seoul Metropolitan Government. The Institute's primary objective is to improve municipal administration through professional research, improve the quality of life in Seoul, and reinforce and sustain competitiveness of Seoul. This joint research between CLC and SI was also carried out with our supporting agencies, HDB, People's Association, and the URA. We are very honored to have with us today Dr. Saw Wang Jin, President of the Seoul Institute, as well as our fellow researchers from the Seoul Institute. Before we begin the lecture, I would like to invite Dr. Saw to give opening remarks for today's launch. Dr. Saw, please.
It is with great pleasure that I'm opening the launch of Planning the Communities, Lessons from Seoul and Singapore. On behalf of Seoul Institute, I thank Mr. Koo and the Center for Liveable Cities for inviting and welcoming us to this event. My special gratitude goes to the CLC staff who organized this event and our visit to Singapore. We appreciate the final outcome of a collaborative research between Seoul Institute and CLC. I have tried to read the book from cover to cover. From what I saw, it already looks very nice. A mere glance is enough to show the amount of hard work that researchers at both institutions have poured into this book. I am personally grateful to see that hiring so many PhDs in one building for Seoul Institute and putting up with their egos have finally brought out something useful. Today I also learned that if I wait long enough, they can actually produce something tangible. And I believe Mr. Koo feels the same way. Of course, I'm just kidding. We have formed a meaningful relationship over the past few years. Through our exchanges, we found that we have much more in common than we knew. Singapore and Seoul have grappled with similar urban problems. For one, we are all trying to move away from a car-oriented environment. We are trying to initiate a paradigm shift from car-centered to a pedestrian-friendly city. Seoul has created a number of pedestrian projects, including the recently opened Seoul Station 7017, or Solo 7017 as we call it. Through this project, once elevated highway has been converted into a vibrant pedestrian space for citizens. Observing the transformation of an eyesore into a pleasant public space is quite an experience. Singapore has been transforming itself to a car-light city as well. Our first joint research project, Walkable and Bikeable Cities, demonstrates how we are making such effort, how we are similar, and in what ways we are different in pursuing the same goal. What really matters in these projects is to engage with communities. In the past, Seoul had a heavily top-down planning process with an authoritarian leadership. As with other developing countries, we pushed a policy agenda that focused on efficient economic development. We still yearn for economic growth, but the world around us has changed. It is freer with WikiLeaks, Facebook, and Wi-Fi internet. People can express their opinions anytime, anywhere, with no hold barred. In that sense, the current topic of our joint research is both timely and promising. In Seoul, not only is it difficult to get things done without citizen involvement, but planners have realized that citizens can in fact offer valuable advice. Our joint study introduced various community programs from Singapore and Seoul. It will be interesting to see the similarities and differences in our experience of participatory planning. Through this study, we have come to understand the possibilities, potentials, difficulties, and limitations of community participation. I believe our research can offer lessons to planners, not just in Singapore and Seoul, but also to other city governments that are preparing for active citizen involvement. Aside from all the serious work, we became friends over the years. Key researchers at our institute and the staff of CLC, they developed a cordial working relationship. They worked together, overcoming the challenge of a long distance. What is more, they shared meals, they often exchanged jokes, and made fun of each other. This is pretty much what friends have to do every day. Whatever we do in our lives, at the end of the day, that's what really matters. As the president of the Seoul Institute, I am fully responsible for their friendly behavior during 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays. That means I'm your friend too. Although this is my first visit to CLC, we are already getting along pretty well, I think. Right, Mr. Koo? I would like to thank again Mr. Koo and the staff of CLC for hosting this wonderful event. You are the greatest host ever. Thank you very much again.
I first went to Seoul, I think almost 20 years ago. And it was a very, very different Seoul from what it is today. The Seoul that I went to was really very, very congested, very crowded. It was really, the example of what you wouldn't want to see in a high-density city. There's a sense of crowdedness that you associate high density with. It took us hours to get from one point to another, and most of the time we felt we were just sitting in a bus or in a car. But today, Seoul, I just revisited Seoul maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and today Seoul is really a transformed city. And I think the transformation probably started maybe 10 to 15 years ago. And one of the kind of key turning points, I think, in the transformation that I think affected the psyche of the Seoul citizen was when a highway in the city was demolished, and where the highway used to be was a river, the Cheonggae River or the Cheonggae Stream. And I think today many of us who visit Seoul, invariably will want to go and see, this Cheonggae Stream that's been so beautifully restored. It's now a wonderful night spot for young couples, for families, and so on, besides tourists. And the highway is no longer there. I think that kind of signified a turning point in Seoul's transformation when they began to kind of had a lot of confidence that they could make Seoul a much more livable city in spite of its density. Now, Singapore, compared with Seoul, we are half the population of Seoul. You're 10 million, we are 5.6 million. In terms of area, actually your area, the city itself is probably a little bit smaller than Singapore, so your density is very, very, very high. So a very high density. So I think there's a lot that I think we can learn from you in how to be livable and high density. And one of the institutions I think that has been really behind a lot of the transformations of Seoul in the last 10 to 15 years is the Seoul Institute, right? Mr. Seo, President Seo, you're very modest when you kind of claim the achievements of the Seoul Institute. But we all know that the thinking, the planning, the forward-looking research that has driven a lot of the Seoul City's achievements have actually come from the Seoul Institute, right? And you are a wonderful institution. I think now you're 300 people, 75 PhDs, and you are really like a think tank or the advisor to the mayor of Seoul. So I think we were very fortunate at CLC when we got to know you and we did an MOU with you and we decided to collaborate and to work on some projects where we could kind of exchange ideas and knowledge between Seoul and Singapore. So the first project was one on mobility, which we published earlier, and we had a forum at the World City Summit in 2016. And I'm very glad that we now have got the second project completed. Today you'll hear more about it, about community planning or participatory planning, comparing Seoul and Singapore. And then under your new leadership, President Seo, I hope that our collaboration will go on from strength to strength. And it's not just a collaboration between CLC and the Seoul Institute. I think it's a collaboration between Singapore and Seoul, because whenever we do these projects, it's not just us. I think we involve many other partners besides ourselves. So in our case, we've involved the Land Transport Authority, we've involved the HDB, URA, People's Association, all very important agencies in Singapore. So I'm very glad that we have completed this project. We all look forward to hear about it. I hope all of you will enjoy the talk this afternoon and don't leave without getting a copy of the publication. And thanks very much for everyone's support and being here today.
I'm an urban sociologist, so my research areas focus on the social changes related to the urban policy or social policy of the city. And the title of my presentation is Seoul in 2040. As you expected from the title, this is one of the future research or future studies. Future studies is an area that deal with the changes over the time. So in my presentation, I want to talk about the demographic and social changes of the city now and in the next decades. How is the emerging issues of Seoul in the present and future? And so based on my population projections and data analysis and social survey, I will present the demographic change of population structures and the feature of household and socio and cultural trends of the Seoul. Okay, let's start. And first part is the first, about 2 decades down the road from now, Seoul will experience a demographic cliff. In other words, it's an emergence of the new population structures that has not been experienced yet. Seoul's population reaches its largest in 1992 at well over 10 million. And since then, it steadily shrinking. And at 2040, it reaches 9 million. It's the same in the early 50s. But the important point is the fundamentally, the new population is totally different in its qualitative structures. As I said, the demographic cliff, and demographic cliff means that in the most technical sense of the term, refer to the abrupt decrease in the size of the working class. So we have experienced the annual decrease in working age population of 300,000 persons will bring to 5.45 million in 2040. The worrisome phenomena of this is the abrupt decrease of in the age of mid-40s and late 40s. And this slide shows the abrupt decrease of the population in their late 40s. This is the between 2016 and 2014. And over the past half years, the size of population under 30s has rapidly decreasing. The left graph that shows that in the 1990s, under 30s is make up over almost 60%. That is these areas. And in 1990, under 30s population is made up 57% of total population. But at in the 2040, the size is almost half, and just 25%. That is the demographic changes of Seoul in the first part. And second, new household will arrive. In other words, single or two-person household is popular. Yeah, in 2040, the household, out there are many numbers, and the population will reach 4 million numbers, but I'm hoping 2.6 million are single or two-persons household. It is emergence of a new population, and yeah, this slide shows the rapid growth of single-person household. Rapid graph shows the increasing rate of single-person household. At the Europe in the 1980s, the person of single-person household is just under 5%, 4.5% of 1980s. But at the year of 2015, the size increased till 30%. And the ratio of one-person household in Seoul and nation has increased more than fivefold over the 30 years. And one-person household constituted, as I said just before, and below 5% at the year of 1950s, but 1915s, the size increased to 30%. And that is implicating that 1/3 of the household can be regarded as a home aloners. And this, in other words, Seoul in the future will be atomized cities. And this graph shows that the household type, typical household type, and both families, one or two child. As at the year of the 2000 years, that portion is almost 50%. But at the year of 2035, that portion is cut in half. That these demographic changes force to us introduce new concept of family. The family concept is changing, and those are the demographic features of our society. This slide related to the low birth rate. And in Seoul, total birth rate, that means the number of births the average woman has over the lifetime is under 1.0. And Seoul is the lowest birth rate among the city in Seoul, and it's another emerging issues in Seoul. And the number as soon as the number of fertile aging women in Seoul has rapidly decreasing. So as the demographic features, so first one is the population structure is changing, and second is household concept is changing, and third, 50s, and is regarded as a young person. Okay, by 2040, median age will be 52 years old. And by right, as I said that at the year of 2040, the population size reaches 9 million. And by running the 9 million people in a single law by age, we can say that the middle age is 52 years old. So even as they are beginning to gray hairs, they will not be regarded as old anymore. So that is. And the median age 52 is related to the super aging society. And so Seoul as a society will arrive sooner or later. And another problem is the elderly living alone in Seoul. This graph, this map shows that the elderly living alone, percent of living alone by district. And sooner or later we will be the hyper as the society. And those are the demographic features of Seoul, and within a decade or 2 decades, the humanscape of Seoul will be totally different, and where people live longer, and the aging issues and the low birth rate issues as the demographic feature of Seoul. Okay, let's move to social issues in Seoul. As we all know that, we have experienced rapid development and speed urbanization. And so, because of the united urbanization, because of that, and social values disappeared, and social conflict is emerging. It's in our societies, and so decreased interpersonal relations and reduced social trust is prevalent in our cities, and because of that, relatively high rate of suicide and low birth rate is prevalent in our society. It's a social issues in our cities. And another issue is in Seoul is social integration. And this graph shows the income level and the education level. And in our city, income and education inequality is emerging. And by district, for example, you know the Gangnam. Gangnam is the richest district in Seoul, and Gangnam's education level is relatively high. For example, bachelor's degrees, portion of bachelor's degrees is almost 50%. But in Gangbuk area, as the lowest income cities, average income is lowest, and the education level is half compared to Gangnam. It's another inequality problems, and because of that, social integration is emerging issues. And another inequality issue is the hierarchical ladder anxiety. But people in Seoul don't think that Seoul is not animal hub society. Possibility of class mobility, this graph shows that, and possibility of class mobility is lower and lower by year. And just around 35% of people think that it is possible to move up a class in this society. That is big problems in our society. And so the public policy or public agent and city government's aim is to raise the citizens' happiness. And this map shows that happiness map, we call it happiness map of Seoul by categories. And there, we recognize that there's a disparity or inequality on happiness score by district. And so generally, there is a correlation between income and happiness. By the way, after certain level, this is the correlation, about the income level, GDP level, and happiness score, and in the global world. And so generally, as I said, that income and GDP and happiness score is correlated. But by the way, after certain level of that, of the level of the income, happiness score does not increase as much as income increased. We call it the Stalin paradox. And I want to tell another part of the happiness, correlation between happiness and age issues. As I said before, Seoul facing the super aged society, we are transition toward that. And World Happiness Report published by the UN. UN published the happiness report from 2012, and the World Happiness Report said that the happiness score by age shows typically a UGI pattern. And in other words, early age and the stages feel they are happier, but in the mid ages, exactly the age is 46 years old. 46 years old is the desperate age. And they are the, I'm unhappy, I'm totally unhappy. But years by years, in the senior period, almost people start to feel happier than ever before. We call it U-shaped pattern, and U-shaped pattern is appeared all around the world. And so there's no evidence of U-shaped pattern. U-shaped pattern. And so in their in the 50s and 60s, there are desperately drop of the happiness score as the big problems. In our society, our aging societies, and this is the big problem of our society, and we should have some actions for that. And so I conduct an analysis. What are the key factors to impact on citizens' happiness score? And so I have many analysis, and as a result, I will briefly explanation. According to OS model, socioeconomic factors explain the increasing of happiness score, aging and income. And age factor could explain the happiness of people, and age factor impact is negatively, as I said, in Seoul, and income factor is positively. And state mobility variables means the possibility of future hope, so that variable affects significantly to the happiness score. That implies very important policy implications. Why we should, why the urban government should involve in the topic of social integration as very important issues, and to solve the social inequality problems. And social capital factors could explain the happiness score. Trust, neighbor trust, or government trust affects significantly to the happiness score. And regional identity also affects significantly to the happiness score of the citizen. This is final part of my presentation. In our joint research, we co-research on the citizens' participation, and in my presentation, I told about the demographic changes and the social issues in Seoul. And we conducted a survey of citizen survey, and we asked how's the Seoul in 2040. And people replied, and future of Seoul will be diverse, but social and economic polarization and unfairness will still reign supreme as key social issues now and in the future, as the result of that survey. And before wrapping up my presentation, I stress on the Mayor Park's vision. Mayor Park's main policy stress on the urban inclusiveness, and the inclusive growth as the vision of Mayor Park's administration. For the implementing inclusive growth of Seoul, the role of social capital, based on my analysis, is so important, and reach to that goal, citizen participation is the major factor in the area of the social capital. Paradigm shift to citizen participation is ongoing. This is the story of my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
So this is the second joint research project between the CLC and SI. The project focuses on examining the approaches to citizen participation in planning. We looked at several case studies from both cities, and from there, lessons are distilled from both cities' experiences on how citizens can be involved in urban planning and development processes.
The research team of CLC and SI visited the relevant cases, site locations in each city to deepen our understanding of each other's context and approach to citizen participation. We didn't know each other well, so when I was in Singapore on December of last year with my team, I felt that the weather was hot at the time, and the discussion with your community was hotter than your weather. Yeah. And our friends from the Singapore agencies, for example, HDB and PA and MCCY, joined the CLC for a study trip to Seoul on February of this year. And we also tried to reach out beyond the research team and engage the other experts and the practitioners and the citizen volunteers through the roundtables and interviews. So I think this publication that we have today is not solely the efforts of CLC and SI, but the product of everyone who has contributed their experience, ideas, and perspectives on participatory planning in Singapore and Seoul. So I can find someone in the audience, so I really appreciate for all of them again.
So just to give you an overview of the case studies, we organized them into different scales and contexts, ranging from town-level rejuvenation plans, neighborhood-level planning initiatives, major developments in existing communities, to programs that are targeted at smaller-scale projects to encourage community participation and ownership. And aside from these case studies, we also studied the urban planning frameworks, as well as the system of local community organizations in both cities. This allowed us to better understand the context in Seoul and Singapore, and consequently the kind of differences in approaches in both cities towards citizen participation in planning. And so as for the research findings, we actually distilled the case studies based on two key questions. Firstly is how governance and planning framework can facilitate community involvement. Regardless of whether citizen participation is facilitated by the government or through bottom-up initiatives, public policies and planning systems will have a fundamental impact on creating room for citizens to contribute to planning and development processes. The second question examines how community involvement can generate better outcomes. Good outcomes from community engagement do not happen by chance. To produce constructive and inclusive outcomes that contribute positively to the plan and development, the engagement process needs to be well curated and well designed. Now we'd like to share with you briefly some of the lessons under these two key questions.
I think before the citizen participation in urban planning, we have to create a system that aligns the various stakeholders within the government. Such coordination is especially crucial in macro level planning or the large scale community developments. So our Tampines hub in Singapore is a good example of how 12 different agencies came together to meet various needs of residents to create a town level community hub. My colleagues and I visited the OTH yesterday, and I could see the very impressive and well integrated public programs which are oriented by the agencies.
So next, the relevance of urban planning to citizens actually increases as one moves down the various layers of planning. The more local the scale, the more residents can relate to the plans. The experience of both Singapore and Seoul shows that incorporating more detailed local plans within the overall planning framework can create more opportunities for community involvement. For example, in Seoul, the city government actually divided the whole city into 116 local communities. Detailed plans were developed with inputs from residents, and the local community plans also served as intermediate plans to coordinate between the overall Seoul master plan and the urban management plans, which are used for detailed implementation. Next is working with existing residential organizations. Well-established resident organizations often form the heart of the community. They anchor extensive networks within the community and possess a wealth of knowledge on the local neighborhoods. Existing resident organizations are therefore important partners for community planning. One very good example is the Gyeonggi Line Forest Park, which is an urban park created from the former rail line in Seoul. So essentially, it is Seoul's version of Singapore's rail corridor. Following its completion, the Seoul Metropolitan Government actually set up a community council from existing communities and resident organizations. And this council actually oversees the maintenance and vibrancy of the public space. This encouraged a greater sense of ownership by the communities and allowed local solutions to be customized to local needs.
Making the planning process easier can help to attract the wider and more diverse participants. It makes the planners incorporate perspectives that may otherwise be missing in planning process and ensures the inclusiveness in planning outcomes. For this to happen, the engagement platform, the method, and the contents should be made as accessible as possible. For example, the rail corridor in Singapore benefited from the diverse range of engagement platforms set up by the URA. I heard that the 5-year efforts involved site works and idea competitions and community dialogues to reach out to various interest groups and understand their needs.
So another factor that we felt was very important in community engagement is the involvement of experts. While communities possess in-depth local knowledge, especially on their own neighborhoods, residents often do not have the technical skills to translate their knowledge into feasible solutions. Involving these experts in community engagement processes can help bridge the gap between local needs on the ground and broader planning considerations. Experts can also provide more objective and professional perspectives that balance the diverse voices within the community. For example, the Vibrant Community Center in Seoul aims to create resident-run community spaces in the Dong office building, which is the local neighborhood public administration office in Seoul. So this program actually involves social architects to work together with the community to create shared space solutions that address the needs and concerns of various parties. Mutually agreeable and beneficial spaces were then created through this collaboration between the experts and the community stakeholders. But having said that, not all issues at the local level actually require government or even expert intervention. Actually, given the right kind of skills and social connections, there is often scope for communities to develop their own solutions, especially for less complex day-to-day issues. Seoul's approach in particular to community development emphasizes on the importance of giving citizens decision-making powers and resources. One very good example is the Dong Level Community Planning, which is the neighborhood planning program in Seoul that aims to empower communities to solve their own problems. So residents are actually given authority to decide on certain community level issues. And this eventually helped to encourage them to build up their community planning capabilities over time.
Yeah, nowadays I think the physical improvement is not the only goal of planning and development. With successful participation, communities can build a stronger social bond and mutual trust in the planning process. I think in Singapore, HDB's Building Our Neighborhood's Dreams initiative, a short bond introduced as the part of the NRP, uses a little bit deeper engagement activities to identify the kind of community activities and infrastructure upgrades with the residents. This kind of process achieved not just physical improvements, but also social outcomes. The 18% of resident participants said that they got to understand the concerns and ideas of other neighbors, and another 18% got remarked that they got to know new neighbors, new friends from the workshop.
So perhaps Miri, you could first share with us on why the Seoul Metropolitan Government places so much emphasis on involving citizens in its policy-making processes.
In my presentation, I stress on the paradigm shift of Seoul. And so first reason is for example, population changes and social trends pushes the city government toward the citizens' participations. And so the city government should adapt to the change, and their administration is changing toward the participatory governance as one reason. And second reason is I on the role of Mayor Parks. Mayor Park is our current city mayor, and he is former civil activist. He knew well the power of citizen participation. So after taking the office as a mayor of Seoul, he established many organizations related to the citizens' participation. It's the second reason, I think.
We have heard also quite a bit from Seoul. Let's now hear some of the Singapore perspective. The People's Association has served to connect the government with the people since the early days. Ms. Fu, could you share with us on why involving citizens and creating community spaces like community centers is so crucial for the PA?
The PA was established by our founding father, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, in 1960, with the mission in promoting racial harmony and social cohesion for a multiracial Singapore. So the community center were built with the involvement of the citizens to engender a sense of belonging to the community. The community also raised funds to co-share 10% of the construction cost to instill a greater sense of community ownership. The PA role in building community bonding is relevant and important in today's context. So do the CC and the RC Center in widening the PA network, outreach and engagement of residents, build trust in the community, and the CC and RC provide a common community space for people of different background, different races, religion, and age to come together to interact and bond. So the community center and RC also serve as serve to connect the people to people, people to the government, and government to the people, and strengthen the connection between the people and the government. So the building of community infrastructure, small and large, small one like the RC Center of only 160 square meter, large one like the Tampines, our Tampines hub of 120,000 square meter, is a process to bond the people and build community. The community ownership, therefore, is set as the strategic objective of PA for all the building and upgrading of its infrastructure, its community infrastructure. The Tampines Hub is a pilot of the 100 of a large-scale lifestyle integrated hub, bringing 12 multi-agency to provide service and facility to Tampines residents. The name of our Tampines Hub itself means that the integrated hub is planned by the people, built and for the people of Tampines, in line with the strategic set by the grassroots advisors and PA management in 2010, when the Town Hub concept was initiated. First, OTH is anchored. First, the OTH is anchored on a very sound vision and strategy to build a resident-centric integrated hub for the people of Tampines Hub. Resident centricity and gender community ownership are the two key strategies set for OTH development.
So Eileen, perhaps you can share with us on HDB's perspective on community development and involvement when rejuvenating the spaces.
I think for HDB, the two key motivating factors for us to want to involve the community in our rejuvenation programs is really firstly, I think after pumping in so much resources and time in our rejuvenation programs, what we want is really the residents, the spaces and the facilities that we provide under the programs to be well utilized and it's relevant for the community. So I think to achieve that, it's really important that we actually involve the people on the ground, because I think they are the people that know the needs and the issues on the ground better. And secondly, I think for HDB, with 80% or more than 80% of the residents living in HDB flats our role goes beyond just being housing provider, a provider of flats. We want to build communities as well. So I think it was shown earlier at one of the bond project. Really, the outcome for us is not just about the infrastructure or the facilities, but to build communities through the process. And because we believe that through participatory planning, it is really a very powerful tool and a good platform to bring the residents together. I think through the discussions, focus group discussions and design workshops, etc., they can actually come together, talk about their local issues, understand each other's perspective, and hopefully they can actually come out to see the better good lah. So I think that's really the two motivating factors for HDB.
So other than these dedicated community spaces like community centers and community places in HDB, Singapore is also increasingly focusing on providing good quality public spaces for the people. And one of the major public space projects in the pipeline is the rail corridor. So, Sinin, could you tell us more about this project and how you already worked with the community in planning the rail corridor?
First, I'll give a quick introduction of the rail corridor. Most of us already know about the rail corridor. It's 24 kilometers long. It generally refers to a land that was returned by Malaysia to Singapore on 1st July 2011. What you may not know, however, is that there are 1 million people who live within 1 kilometer of the rail corridor. And obviously, there are also many employment places near the rail corridor. There are a lot of parks, recreational areas, and there are 58 educational institutions in close proximity to the rail corridor. And that's really exciting. Because if you think of the rail corridor as a legacy infrastructure, the beneficiaries of of this rail corridor is really these young people and students in the schools. Now, how do we do public engagement? I would say that we did not instigate public engagement initially. What happened, I had to go back a little bit of history because back in, I think it was May 2010, the two prime ministers of Singapore and Malaysia announced that the issues with regards to the return of the land to Singapore, the KTM land, was resolved. And the land would be returned on 1st July 2011. And that got a lot of people interested in the future of the rail corridor, in particular the nature lovers, right? And we have to thank the Nature Society for that, because within a couple of days, they already wrote a letter to the newspaper and said, look, we should keep the rail corridor as it is, don't develop it on it, don't sell it, don't cut it into pieces, just leave it as a green corridor. And 4 months later, they came out with a report to the ministry and say the same thing, basically keep it as a nature corridor. We didn't say anything for a long time because, between May 2010 and July 2011, it wasn't our land, right? And obviously there's some negotiations going on for the details of the handover, and so it wasn't appropriate for us to really jump in. But as time goes on, there were more people writing into us about what are your plans for the rail corridor. So we decided to take a two-pronged approach. One was that we decided to call up those people who wrote in to the press, and we just want to meet up with them. Some of these people we're not familiar with. So we wanted to have a chat with them and see what are their views, and want to assure them that actually we have no plans for the rail corridor, no firm definitive plans, right? That was important, right? And we told them that there'll be a period of public engagement, and so we tell them that, look, we want to go through a period of public engagement, and we want to hear ideas from people and what are the views. So come and join us. We decided to form a group called the Rail Corridor Consultation Group. So we invited members from the Nature Society. We had the blogger. We have avid cyclist. We have, I think there was a butterfly expert as well. So a number of these people, we invited them onto this Rail Corridor Consultation Group chaired by Minister of State Tan Chuan Jin at that point in time. And essentially this group was to help us chart public engagement and the plans for the rail corridor over the next few years. The other prong we took was we decided to go out and meet people, to hear what people has to say about the rail corridor, because we realized that not everyone has been to the rail corridor. So we decided to set up a website. I don't know whether I can work this. Yep, so we set up a website ourselves where we could able to post information about the corridor, what's coming up. We asked people to post their pictures, their ideas, and in fact, we made it a very interactive website through the help of one of the members of the Rail Corridor Partnership. we decided to use what we call a user voice platform where people could actually vote on the ideas that people has posted, and they could also comment on other people's ideas, right? So we did a number of things. We had a lot of walks. A lot of people has not been to the rail corridor. So every time we had the community workshop, we organized walks. And the main idea really was to find out from them, what is your feeling about the rail corridor after the walk? What do you like about it? What you do not like about it? What do you think about the landscape? Do you feel threatened by the landscape? Some people actually are threatened by the landscape. Too much, tall grass, for instance. What do you think about the trail? Do you think it should be improved? So the idea was to get people to be emotionally connected with the place, right? And that helps us a lot because it gives us a sense of what people values as far as the rail corridor is concerned. And that subsequently helped us very much into translating to a set of urban design guidelines, planning design guidelines for the RFP, which I'll talk about later on maybe.
It's interesting to note that Seoul, as you have seen in the earlier case studies presented, also has a disused rail line, the Gyeonggi line, which has been Gyeonggi line.
Gyeonggi line.
I cannot ever say that properly, which has been converted into a public park. So in this case, Hyunchan and Changyi, perhaps you could tell us more about this project and how the SMG had involved the communities in this process.
So airport man here helping out. So Gyeonggi line, the project itself can be kind of divided into the two segments of period. One is before Mayor Park, and then after current Mayor Park inaugurated.
1단계는 공원 설계에 자전거 도로를 포함해서 상당히 많은 시설이 들어가 있어서 주민들이 자유롭게 활용할 수 있는 여지가 상당히 적었습니다.
So the before Mayor Park was in place in City Hall, we had many plans for facilities, bike lanes or sports facility and so forth. So there are not really, many room for residents to enjoy in Gyeonggi Line project.
현장을 방문한 시장님과 공무원들이 설계를 수정해야겠다는 판단을 하게 됐고 다시 한번 지역 주민들의 의견을 들어서 가급적 많은 시설들을 걷어내서 공원이 만들어지고 나면 주민들이 자율적으로 채워나갈 수 있는 여지를 많이 만들었습니다.
So the mayor park came in and saw how the project was going, and he felt that, well, this is not the way we should go. Let's kind of, take the facilities away, so that let's make park first, and then the later residents or citizens can fill in the program by themselves.
공원이 만들어지고 난 다음에 그 주변 지역에 상당한 변화가 일어났는데요. 예를 들면 엄청나게 주민들이 많이 오면서 부동산 가격도 오르고 주변에 주거 환경도 많이 악화가 되고 시간이 좀 넓은 문제도 생겼는데 이런 것들을 지역 주민들과 함께 관리하기 위해서 주민 소비체를
So after the park was completed, in a nutshell, gentrification happened. Real estate prices going up, waste problem, many people coming into people's residential communities, making noises and so forth. So and there was a civil complaint. We are not hesitated Koreans, Seoul citizens especially. We don't hesitate to complain to call. And make civil complaints. So, mayors and city officials, they kind of established or organized a citizen kind of committee for making this Gyeonggi Line better place for community.
Okay, in the example shared so far, we have seen that the governments in both Seoul and Singapore have been working very hard to create more opportunities for community involvement. So, Miree, I'm going to ask you from what you have been very actively talking about, collecting feedback from residents for policy-making purposes. Could you share with us more about this and how citizens' inputs are translated into action?
We all know that. We all know that nowadays the evidence-based policy decision or evidence-based policy process is very important. And so I want to tell you about a real brief explanation of Seoul survey. Seoul survey is a huge scale of the urban policy indicator systems. It is composed of the 12 areas, 42 topics, and almost composed of over 200 indicators. And two of third is composed of the is updated by administrative data, and then 1/3 is collected through the citizen survey, and that survey is conducted to 20,000 households, and in this household over 80 years old over, and total number of survey is the total number of sample survey is over almost 50,000 people. And every year we update the data, and based on the data analysis and which policies impact on citizens and which areas is relatively has the waste problems and the level of happiness score, and which district is more problems than other cities. And so survey is the reference or reference indicators, and referencing and so is using that data, and so Seoul has the Seoul's policy. That system impact on the Seoul's policy is kind of a evidence-based policy process. Yeah.
Seoul's innovative ways of reaching out to citizens are indeed very refreshing. There have also been several programs introduced recently in Seoul to increase citizen participation at local level planning. So Hyun-chan and Chang-yi, can you share more about these?
So with all those programs, let's kind of focus on local community planning and dong level community plan. So before the two plans, our master plan called Seoul Plan 2030 was the first master plan in big city with citizen participation at the core element. But there, it generates more homework to realize the visions that was put forth by our Seoul Plan 2030. So we have, in the very lower level, we have what is called urban management plan. It deals with shape of architecture and where cars can get in and so forth. Kind of detailed plan. It's called the urban management plan. Now we have a Seoul Plan 2030 master plan. We had to have something in between. That is a local community plan. So Seoul divided the whole area into 116 sort of local community, and we held workshops in every those small districts. So local community plan is in between so master plan and then very lower level kind of plan. Dong level plan is something different. We have more than 400 dongs in Seoul, very smallest unit, administrative unit in Seoul. And Mayor Park, before he became mayor, he was a civil activist, and he always emphasized kind of a very lower level participatory plan at very small scale kind of unit. And that was the dong level plan. So from 2012, we are witnessing about 5,000, small kind of community groups who were eager to participate in very low level kind of plan. So those participants, we would say, not an average citizen in Seoul. They were very active, if not an activist, eager to participate in any planning activities in Seoul. So from 2015, Seoul Metropolitan Government finally kind of got up and said, well, you should be part of our inclusive planning process within this kind of institutionalized setup planning process within Seoul Metropolitan Government. So from each dong, we would say on average, about 100 people are now participating in dong level planning, and they're underway. The planning is underway. So then homework would be that Seoul Master Plan, Seoul Plan 2030, and local community plan, those are kind of statutory plan, legally binding kind of planning. But dong level plans are not statutory planning. It's not required. Nobody is required to follow any of the proposals in there. But our homework in the SI, which is making our life kind of difficult, is that we have to kind of be inclusive to try to dong level plans in the institutionalized setup process, so that master plan and local community plan and then dong level plan would be kind of aligned based on a institution, should be recognized by the law.
And Ms. Fu, our Tampines hub has been very successful with strong resident involvement. What do you think are some of the important factors that contributed to the success of this engagement process?
Okay. The OTH, our Tampines hub, is fortunate to have 5 grassroots advisors as the champion for this resident-centric development. And also the PA senior management set the leadership for because we are involving multi-agency. So the PA CE, Chief Executive Director, chair a steering committee to ensure that decisions are made collectively at the steering committee meetings. And then the steering committee met quarterly, regularly up to the completion, from the planning to completion of the projects. Okay. In 2011, 1 year into the planning of the OTH, the grassroots advisor and PM management decided to defer the finalization of the concept plan, the design, to incorporate, to conduct very extensive engagement, community engagement program to solicit view, feedback from the resident. Through 1 year of very extensive community engagement in many channels, for example, we conducted face-to-face interviews and many of the roadshow in Tampines. Phone survey were conducted with the resident. Feedback was obtained from many block party organized by the RC in Tampines. There were also focus group discussion chaired by the 5 grassroots advisors, where residents give their input on their wish, their idea, their aspiration on 5 themes, which are active Tampines, caring Tampines, green creative, and learning Tampines. And the PA and the project team, the grassroots leader, the advisor, took it very seriously, the feedback and input from the resident. Okay. So more importantly is that the feedback from the resident on the resident engagement were implemented and make changes. The changes were made to the plan for the OTH. For example, we added facilities and services such as the hawker center, medical facility, performing art theatres, and also senior care center to the OTH in 2012. That means that we have to redesign, replan the whole of OTH. You know? And also the other thing is that we also take very seriously the concern of the resident. When the resident feedback that they are very concerned about replacement of the jogging track in the stadium, our grassroots leader and the staff visited the user of the existing sport complex and find out what were their concerns. And we found out that it's not the jogging track that they miss. Actually, they were very concerned that we will not provide rubberized jogging track flooring and marker on the track, which will be built on the roof, where when you jog, you have shade, you can have very good view. And then their suggestion were incorporated in the design. We also add in many bicycle lots to the development at convenient location of, at the entrance of various entrance of OTH. The OTH was built in 4 phases. And annex was even added in to house more cycling parking lot, showering facility, lockers for the cyclists under the phase 4 construction. That was already in 2015. So the key factor is that we are prepared to take into consideration feedback from the resident, feedback from the community, and change our plan to meet the needs and aspiration of the community. And then this built trust of the community, and then more feedback were put forward to us. Then there was also a suggestion to provide linkage of OTH to the Tampines Central Park at grade. It was a suggestion from the Reimagine Tampines study. Actually HDB was already building a road cutting through the park. We make a decision, decide to truncate the road, and then incorporate the pedestrian link between OTH and Central Park. This actually improved the connectivity of the resident from the other part of the HDB estate to the OTH. We are very happy that we make that decision, although it involved a lot of hassle with the planning authority. The planning authority, URA, Land LTA, HDB, SLA, really give us a lot of help to facilitate these changes. I'm very appreciative of their help.
So now that we see that aside from creating opportunities for community to be involved, good outcomes from the involvement process do not come by accident. And Eileen, HDB has been experimenting with various ways to bring the community on board for the rejuvenation of neighborhoods. Can you perhaps share with us some of your experience in this aspect?
I think indeed, in recent years, HDB has indeed intensified the engagement processes for several of our rejuvenation programs, for example, remaking of heartlands, as well as the neighborhood renewal program. Maybe I just share like two examples, 2 projects. So the first one is, I think, Bond, we actually, building our neighborhood's dream, we actually injected this bond process into our existing neighborhood renewal program. So what happened is we actually bring forward our engagements upfront, where we actually we try to understand the aspirations of the residents in the neighborhood. And knowing and understanding, by understanding their aspirations, we then try to do up the design. So in the past, is we actually design first, then we will just engage the residents, or do you like option 1 or 2? But right now is we will actually bring forward engagement, understand their aspirations, and actually try to accommodate their needs and issues actually in the plan itself, right? And I think in terms of outcome, and under that project, we usually can reach out to about 500 to 600 residents, through various means lah. Yeah, and I think based on, in terms of outcome, I think what's gratifying is, I think as high as 97%, based on our survey, actually they all look forward to the facilities that will be put up, and they say that they will actually use it lah. So that's actually important for us. The other project is the Hello Neighbor project, social linkway concept, which we actually piloted together with NUS. I think Prof Cho is here, our partner. We actually piloted this project in Tampines Central. What happened is actually based on our research. I think linkways, these are actually usually the walkways or covered walkways that residents will usually use to go from one place to another place, for example, from their flats to the market. And they are very heavily utilized. But sadly, community interactions actually doesn't happen because they're all incidental occurrences and all that. So they don't really interact with their neighbors. So what we wanted to do was to add social spaces along these linkways, so that residents will actually stop by, linger, and then they can actually talk to each other. So we actually reached out to about more than 1,500 residents through various means. Again, we held pop-up sessions, workshops. I don't have slides, but this is actually one of the workshops that we conducted with the residents. And focus group discussions as well. So through an interactive walls at the void decks as well, to reach out to the residents lah. So I think we are happy that this small, in the end, actually what they need is actually very small interventions, like maybe converting a void deck, nearby void deck into a cafe. I think what we are glad is these small interventions actually have created, I think, a very big impact on the ground. For example, a cafe that we added at the void deck, I think right now, some 50 to 60 residents actually patronize that cafe daily. And maybe because this is actually what they want, and they actually, we also see very high level ownership. They actually have to maintain the place. They hold potluck sessions there every day. And actually seniors are also telling us that, one senior was telling me that she has been living in that neighborhood for 20 years. And she probably in the past only know about 3 to 5 neighbors. But right now, because with the cafe, which she actually patronizes every day, she now gets to know about 30 to 40 neighbors. Yeah. So I think these are the small interventions that has, I think, bring about big impact in the community that we are grateful.
And Celine, perhaps you could share how you got some of these good outcomes from the Rail Corridor engagement process.
You mentioned earlier about various public engagement we did. We did ideas competition. We had workshops. We have, in fact, we thought the conversation was too skewed towards nature, greenery, and all that. So what about other people? Are they interested in using the rail corridor for other purposes, for instance? So at one stage we even approached Singapore Amateur Athletic Association, say, hey, you guys, why don't you organize a national cross-country run along the rail corridor? And it didn't happen. So it didn't happen. So we talked to Singapore Sports Council then, say, could you just introduce some event organizers that we can talk to and get them to be interested to do some event along the rail corridor. We managed to talk to a person called Ben Williams. And this guy, I think he's new to Singapore. He was quite eager to organize a run, and that was the first green corridor run. And he had 6,000 runners the first time round, and subsequently 8,000 and maybe even 10,000, right? So the idea was actually, we had to go out and actually give us very good ideas what you can do with the corridor. But from all this input, actually, what happens is that we are able to understand people's aspirations better, what they value. And the practical thing about that is to translate that into what are design and planning goals as you develop the master plan and design the rail corridor. And all those things that they've been telling us, hundreds of things, we distill them to 9 planning and design goals, which is all there, right? And one of the things that stood out for us, actually, and we didn't think about it originally when we started, was that we think this rail corridor should really be an inclusive space and not just for nature lovers. If you look at the middle photograph, That is the picture taken during the first rail corridor run. And those people running there with ropes are blind people. You know, they ran the entire route from Tanjung Pagar railway station to Bukit Timah railway station, about 11 plus kilometers, and they were blind. You know, so we spoke to the organizers afterward and said, look, how did they feel about it? Was there any major accidents? You know, say no. These people enjoy themselves very much because while they cannot see, they can smell, they can hear the birds, they can, you know, they can hear the wind among the trees and all that. And that was really exhilarating for them. They really enjoyed it. And subsequently, as we even did community workshops, we decided, why don't we bring people on wheelchairs down to rail corridor? And it was very tough. It was very, very tough. You can't push them. You can, but they can't go very far. So we had a community workshop and said, look, you think we should design this rail corridor for you as well? So yes, you should not forget us. But we are realistic people, you know. We are not para-Olympians. We're not going to go up the rail corridor 24 kilometers in the wheelchair. You just need to provide a short segment for us to enjoy. In fact, if you can find a high point where I can perch myself and look down at people enjoying the rail corridor, that is good enough for me. See, so they are realistic. So that brings me to the next point about conflicts. Some of the things that we worried about in community workshops and public engagements, what if there are dissenting views? We have people who hate our plans. They really hate it, and there are people who love it. And then when we call a community workshops, they enroll. They're the first people who say, I want to come. They put in a website, they enroll. I remember a conversation I had with my staff, say, hey, should we invite this guy or just tell him that he's full, no need to come, But what happened is that he turned up and he waxed lyrical, about the birds you can see along the rail corridor, and you shouldn't do anything to the rail corridor, keep it the way it is. The more difficult to walk, the better it is, so people walk slowly and can enjoy the place. And the community workshop includes different people, and there are uncles and aunties there, and they look at him and say, hey, look at all the tall grass, got snake or not? So it's not so simple. There are other dissenting views that, you have to take care of the environment as well. It has to be safe. While you wax lyrical about the animals and birds and all that, but we want to use the place, but we want to be assured it is safe. So essentially, it's a design issue. How do you design the place that you can have cake and eat it? So those are interesting things.
So from all these participatory planning efforts from Seoul Metropolitan Government, the city kind of decided that we're going to set up and support kind of intermediary organization connecting Seoul city government and then community. And they're helping out. It has been, it has started a few months ago or maybe a year. So it is in the process, not yet the final outcome, but we are really excited to see how it is going to turn out. But the decision that supports something like intermediary organization, an expert, a civil activist, connecting city government and community, it makes easier to communicate. It makes easier to, get planned, realized in real communities.
My name is Si Cheng. I'm from the Civil Service College. I have two questions. One is actually Mr. Tan elaborated a little bit just now, but I was wondering if Seoul has the same issues. Sometimes when we engage citizens, we are a bit worried that they might just think of themselves and not able to think of the larger community. Given that the 2030 Seoul Plan is so ambitious, how did you manage to facilitate the conversations such that people can think about difficult conversations, maybe like, where do you put the hospital or where do you put the incinerator plant, difficult conversations. My second question is, in Singapore, we sometimes have the difficulty of engaging certain groups of people when we do public engagement exercises. In Singapore, these groups are typically young mothers, parents with young children, especially primary school, and working adults or people who are low income. So actually, in order for the Seoul plan to be truly inclusive, what efforts did you take to try to engage people who don't usually come to the meetings?
Our answer would be that in Seoul Plan 23 is master planning process, so we don't deal with difficult question, not so much, right? It's setting the vision, and setting the sort of abstract direction for the whole city, if you will. But local community plan, we have about so more than 100 local community plan. There are difficult questions, so what we do would be to gather all the local community plan stakeholders from each 116 regions and finally get a vote. You vote where the incinerator should go. We call it deliberative democracy in working in Korea, right? I think I could, frame it that way. So there will be experts saying about why, ABC region should have XYZ facilities in terms of considering the whole city of Seoul. So then, difficult decisions should be made by, in a difficult way. If you lose, there will be no way that you can avoid, hosting the sort of a difficult facility in your communities. So we do that. We do that.
This, I think Seoul's approach to participatory planning focuses quite a lot on building the capabilities and capacity of the communities so that I think going forward they can actually help to resolve their own issues, local issues. I think that's one area that I think HDB can definitely learn from and do more. Yeah.
I think so. It's very much like Taiwan as well, right? They are also building capabilities among citizens and do public participation projects, contributing solutions to the problem. But what I find very interesting this afternoon was to hear about this happiness factor, and that somehow that's intrinsically linked to having a sense of inclusiveness. You're included into the decision-making process or included into some, planning process that contributes to well-being. I think that is something very useful because when you have that perspective in mind, then we'll stop thinking about public engagement as another government project, as another thing you have to do, as part of your day-to-day work. But really, it gives you added meaning into why you're doing all these things. At the end of the day, it's really for the benefit of the community, not yourself, really. It's really for the community. So the rail corridor, the same thing, if I can, I'll show you just one last slide. Because that essentially, when we talk about the rail corridor, it's no longer just a trail, but it's a community space. And if you can do this, it'll be fantastic because then everyone will have a sense of community. So if you design it well, and you could say designate one day in a month as the rail corridor day, and you have communities from both sides of the rail corridor gathering in the rail corridor do their own thing, their own community thing, it'll be fantastic. You can have a team. January, let's get healthy, exercise. Because after Christmas, eat too much, right? So you need to exercise. Because Valentine's Day or singles events, it's always supposed to be this month, right? In February, or you could have, Easter egg. Go and collect your Easter eggs along the rail corridor in March or April. So there are many things you can do as a community, and each of them can do their own thing, organize their own thing. One day in a month could be a community cooking day. So maybe somebody along Bukit Panjang want to, have the longest popiah, in the world. You can do it along the rail corridor. So it's possible. You can do your own thing. So I think this is where you get community ownership, stewardship, and I think that gives it added value to some of these community spaces that it's activated, it's meaningful to the community, right?
Okay, so thanks very much to the wonderful panel and for you and the questions you've asked. So we've come to the end of the session.